Hey, welcome back to the Soulrocker podcast, and I am your host, Vanessa Delgado. So in today's episode, as you can see from the title of the podcast episode, this is going to be a random mix of things and in no specific order. I just kind of really want to chat a little bit about fitness, for example. So I often don't like to mention much about fitness and how I'm a certified personal trainer, and through my years of experience and just heavily being involved in like the fitness, and having specific goals and whatnot, and looking to compete even, and working with a couple coaches and whatnot, I consider myself fairly knowledgeable. I say that in the most humble way because I take that stuff very serious. Like it's very hard for me to always speak about things unless it's coming from the heart and I have experienced enough challenges through something, or I've done enough self, discovery within something, or if it has to do with an actual topic, then I like to dive in and only share and express it when I actually feel confident to do so, because I don't want to look like I'm dumb. Or give false information and lead people in the wrong way. So I take when I say certain things very serious. So it's not something that the reason why I dislike to bring it up is because for me, what I noticed that happens to me personally, 9 out of 10 times, is I sense people start to try and educate me, and it should be the other way around, and people should, I don't want to say should, but it's when, you bring that kind of a topic up, at least when I bring that topic up, I do it in a humble way. I don't just start throwing, information out and just being yeah, well, I'm this. And I don't do, even if I do bring it up, oftentimes people kind of bring it up just because of the way they see me eating, or, because sometimes I bring my Tupperware food somewhere, or they just see can see my shape, and sometimes depending on what I'm wearing, my vascularity, things like that. And so people essentially kind of they bring up the topic, and it's just really weird how people don't typically I don't want to say it's weird, but it's just, I find it kind of interesting how people start to kind of share about their stuff instead of kind of saying hey, I have an opportunity to kind of pick somebody's brain. And you can do things in a way, you can ask people questions. People are, I especially am always open to share my knowledge. And you can do it in a way where you're not necessarily giving away free consultations, even though I'm actually up for that. But, some people aren't, and we understand that, I feel that could be a part of the issue, whereas people are too afraid to be what if they don't want to give information out for free? But you can do it in a way where you can, when you express, because I've had conversations with people where you can tell they're very interested, and they're they have some kind of a base knowledge foundation, and they're looking to, kind of further themselves, and they see that I potentially could be that person to help them. Those are the people that I'm okay, I'm super open to sharing. 9 out of 10 times people don't actually have a clue, and I'm not trying to shade anyone for that because I was there. But the topic of fitness is something that is common sense, and I find it more annoying than anything, where people, it's they start to like I said, in a sense, educate me, and they're telling me what they're doing, and then they're just they feel a lot of these people think that they're they have a whole clue, and they're doing everything right. In my head, I'm just I understand this is not common sense information, and people are just not gonna know what I know, but I'm just gosh, if only you could just be quiet for a second and maybe ask me a question, then I can educate, because what you're telling me right now, in my brain, I'm is so wrong. And that's why they're not reaching the goals that they're wanting to, because they're doing everything so wrong. So within the same topic, a frequently asked question that I've gotten over the years, honestly, is it worth getting certified, or should you know them? I've had people come to me, friends, just a bunch of different people, and they're should I, or is it worth it? What was your experience like? And I always say okay, so here's the thing. When I got my certification, I really wasn't in the intention to help people. And I know that sounds terrible, but so essentially when I first started, it was shortly after I started my fitness journey. And I honestly, like, this sounds dumb and silly, but like, it's the truth. I was struggling so much with, everything that I was like learning and applying and just the whole experience of my journey. And I thought, well, if I get certified, like I thought getting certified meant that I was gonna like open this like can of information that I was gonna like learn everything that I saw all these people that were like professionals or coaches or whatever it was, and I was like, I'm gonna know what they know, and I'm gonna be able to progress much quicker and easier. And that's probably like, there's got to be something that like only certified people know. And so that's exactly what I did. And that was my main thing, like why I got certified, was because I was like hoping to find this like information of like all the answers that were going to just be given to me, in a huge book. And then I was going to have everything figured out. And I was totally, I share this with people that's like, and I've learned even with doctors, it's the same kind of way. It's like when you're going as a family practitioner, for example, like you dabble into, obviously it's not comparable in the same sense, but to an extent, you dabble into so many different things, because when it comes to being a certified trainer, like you tap into like nutrition a little bit, and that's why there's nutritionists, right? Because there's a whole like deeper, it's kind of like they have their own profession, they have their own, like, that's what they specialize in, right? And the same thing goes with their massage therapy and, knowing your body to the structure and things like that. So that way you can learn how to recover and all these things. Then you have your actual how to train, and there's people that specialize in that as well. And that's why it's you touch base as a certified trainer, you touch base on everything so lightly. Like you just barely tap a little bit onto each topic, and that's as far as it goes. Like, sure, I learned some things that I didn't know, but it wasn't like, I learned way more through just continuously researching all the damn time. I even took actual like I did a lot of courses, small courses on specific like topics that are really, really specific into the training, even just like tension overload, like it just like very like little things that I like would take courses on, or I would join webinars where people were, talking. Some people were doing them for free, and some people were doing them for, low cost, or one session of a webinar. So I dabbled into a lot of things and really spent a lot of time and effort into learning a lot of things. And then also by, working with other people, talking to other people, is how I, continuously began to progress and learn a lot. So it wasn't necessarily, and so I just say that, like, I mean, I don't regret getting certified, but if I were to give, advice to myself again, I'd probably be like, no, just continue learning and just continue applying some of the things that you kind of being a student of yourself. And if you're really serious, about, becoming a coach and things like that, then yes, I find that to be somewhat of the very bottomless necessity of starting your career, if that's what you're looking for. But if you're just going to end up like where I am, like, then like that's really not necessary. So here's another little random thing talking about drinking. So this seems to be an interesting one because I'm not a huge drinker and I've never been. And I feel like this gets a lot of like weird attention, or a lot of like nods, or like just a weird feedback and looks, because people are like, what? You don't really drink? So I grew up in a family. So I was raised by my mom's side of the family. And on my mom's side of the family, women never drank. So it was just a thing, like women just didn't drink. I don't think that there was a specific message or reason per se for that, but it was just something that I just never saw women drinking in my family. So it didn't really make me want to, go into that. And then once I started to kind of hang out with my friends and things like that, I was also taught by my mom, besides, being raised by not having women drink, my mom also kind of, would talk to me a lot about how she saw a lot of the girls when she was, growing up herself. And I mean, my mom was a young mom because she had me at 17. So that often made me like listen to what she was saying, because I didn't feel she was this old-fashioned mom and like, oh, what do you know, mom? Like, you're so old. Like, that wasn't the mindset that I had, because my mom was such a young mom. So I would take what she was saying into consideration, because a lot of times what she would say, I'm like, well, shit, like she's practically saying things that like seems like what I'm kind of dealing with and going through. So, hearing what she would say about how she noticed just things, how like guys didn't respect the girls like that, and how it could cause things to happen, like you never know, from you not being fully conscious of yourself, like what can happen and what can go wrong. And that's what a huge thing that kept me from wanting to really drink. And also, like, when I had experienced a couple times where I drank and got pretty tipsy and whatnot, like the mornings after were just not fun at all. And I'm like, this is not worth, like, I just didn't like how I, felt. And I didn't like how I felt just not being in control and fully conscious of myself. And of course, I'm not a saint, like I, have had my moments, but it was far less than many, especially since I got into, weightlifting and things like that. That's actually not really helpful to trying to build muscle and maintaining a shape and things like that. Like, of course, it's okay to have it in small amounts and having a little bit, having that balance. It's okay to sit there and have it as often as some of these girls tend to drink is just very like, it's just not going to be conducive to what I'm trying to maintain and create within my body. And also on a spiritual level, I've, read a lot about how drugs and alcohol really just don't, they're not helping you align to your higher self, So, and I mean, I can feel that, when I have experienced it, I'm like making the connection even throughout the years and connecting that information now. I'm like, yeah, that's totally right. So for me, that's my reasons why I don't drink. And, I find that kind of crazy that people sometimes kind of like try to push you into that and find it weird. And it's like, no, it's not that weird. It's not to say that I don't ever drink, because I do on occasion, and even when I do drink on occasion, like it'll be one drink or something, it'll be like, I'll have a glass of wine, or I might have like a shot to celebrate with someone. Like, that's fine, but like, that's as far as it goes. Like, I'm not trying to get drunk. Like, no thanks. So another, like, shifting on to another subject is self-help books. The thing about self-help books and how they're becoming really like mainstream is really, really great. And we can get into rabbit holes of reading one after another. But the problem often is that many of us just read and we make sense of some things, but don't actually utilize or put into action what we learn. There's this English philosopher that named Herbert Spencer that once said, "The great aim of education is not knowledge, but action." And I mean, how true is that? Like, one can read a million books, but how helpful is it if we aren't implementing the advice? What I try to do is I pick at least 1 to 3 concepts of every book and begin to apply them in my everyday life, which is why I also am picky with what I read, because I want to take away something which I will apply. And if books are not really kind of being something that I am working towards at the moment, or if it's books that just kind of give me that vibe of like, this is just gonna be repetitive things that I've already read or I'm already experiencing myself, whatever, then I'm really not gonna want to dive into it. Like, I want to dive into something that's really gonna give me like a something that I can take away, like I said, 1 to 3 concepts of every book and begin to apply. I don't want to buy a book in any format and only open it to read once in a blue moon or read a chapter and put it down. Like, that's just not really the type of reader that I am, and I know that a lot of us are. And So I think something that I just implemented on my own years ago, especially when I started like self-development books and self-help books, were like you have to have that mindset of like, okay, commitment, right? So I commit to reading this book and I'm saying this personally, I commit to reading a book like I do with everything. Like I try and commit to, I apply fitness the same way. I'm like, okay, this is going to be a commitment to self-development, which is why the self-help books, I apply that like commitment aspect to it, and nutrition and my health and my relationships, And another thing that I do is I highlight my books with sticky notes and actually highlighting and also taking actual notes either on phone or on paper. I think this is something that I started to just implement on my own because I'm like, I started off as that person that kind of, was just dabbling to books and, but not really doing what I was reading. And I was just kind of like letting it go through one ear and out through the other. Like, sure, you're like reading, you're like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. And you're like, I'm going to do this. And you feel inspired and motivated. But then, days later or shortly after you read something, like you forget. And I was like, okay, I can't just keep doing this. Like I need to figure out a strategy to help me to retain this information and to actually apply. So that's when I started to use the books to my advantage, and I was like, let me stick sticky notes in there and actually like highlighting them, taking notes. Like I have notebooks and like loose leaf papers that I, from scrap paper that I use, that I'm taking notes. Like I'm at work sometimes and I'll like read and I'm doing that, or sometimes like I'm reading something and because I even read on my so I personally love actual books. That's my favorite. But I also, read Kindle books, and I also listen to a little bit of the Audible books, So, taking notes, because, taking notes and or on paper or on your phone, I create journal entries with what I read for the day. I sit back and reflect on what I read. In a sense, I create mini book studies with myself, with the books that I'm reading. And, all this stuff, like, it helps retain information, but it also helps to put more into action and practice in multiple ways, especially because I often enjoy reading 2 books at a time, but usually they have to be on different topics, because otherwise you're going to I get confused. Anyone can get confused, right? So I kind of change the topics a little bit so that way I can keep following along. Personally, I read all formats of books, but like I said, my favorite is hard copies. And I love the Kindle books while I'm on the go. Like, especially like lately at the grocery stores, the visit, like those checkout lines are horrendous and they're like hella long. So instead of scrolling on social media, I read instead. Or if I am sometimes doing cardio, oftentimes I'll read. Another time that I reading the Kindle books is like if I'm at an office or waiting for an appointment or something, and I'm like in the office sitting down. Like that's what I like to do, because anyways, I feel kind of awkward opening up my phone and other people kind of like looking to see what I'm, because sometimes people glance to see what you're, whether it's on purpose or not. Like we sometimes glance at people's phones, and then like you're seeing what they're looking at social media. That just kind of creeps me out. So, and I rather utilize my time in a more educational way rather than just kind of social media doesn't do shit for you. So, I mean, it can if you are purposeful with it, and I try to be as well. But, at the end of the day, it's like I would rather read. I know not many people can do that because of the noise and the distraction, but that's just something that I think I've learned to tune people out, and it's something that I had to work on, and I've gotten really good at it. So, another thing is, reading is reading. And we often have, like nowadays, we have so many options. Well, not so many, but we have options, and, to whatever method you find easiest is better than like not reading at all. Also, when reading books that contain more knowledge and self-education purposes, you don't want to actually force yourself to read it fast. It's okay to sit with it and read every day, but just a couple minutes or 2 pages, because honestly, those kind of books, 2 pages in those books have so much info that one needs to process. And if you start to read like a chapter or more pages, you're going to lose what you're reading, you know. And sometimes that is the problem with some people, is like retaining that information that you're reading, because your mind starts to wander. You know, it's like you're reading and all of a sudden, like, you're just like, oh shit, let me start back, you know. And it's like, we also put that pressure on ourselves to be like, oh, I have to finish this, you know, ASAP, or like I need to read, you know, a shit ton in, you know, a while. Like, I don't know. There's just a lot of pressure that sometimes we put on ourselves, and it's like, that's not necessary, especially with these kinds of educational books. Like, I don't do that. And I know that I'm pretty good at retaining information and reading at a pretty decent level and all those things, and just because I've been reading all my life. But I don't even like to do that, because I'm like, even for me, I'm like, I need to process this shit, because this is a lot of gems, you know. Self-help books are now, they're also more than just like mindset. There's many that I consider self-help, which, I mean, it could be for anything that you're just looking to progress in life. Like if you're looking for learning how to better manage your finances, like, to me, that's kind of in the same boat, you know. It doesn't have to be all about mental health. And a big mistake one can make is to blindly follow what we read. And this is why I sit back and reflect on it, because I process it, because while it may have worked great for the author or for others, it doesn't mean that it's exactly the case for me, you know. And I question everything that I read as a reader. And it's not to say that what I read isn't true or real. I'm not saying that these people are not, you know, their information isn't good. It's just, but sometimes it's more about taking a recipe and make it in your own, you know. So it's like, it's not everything gonna match and work for me to the T. You know, it's about taking someone else's success and adapt it to fit your life. That is my little spiel on that. And then the last thing that I want to bring up in this episode is a personal theory. So it wasn't until the last year or so where I discovered accepting being average, which is has been one of my biggest fears, and just learning how to accept that. And what I mean by average is this. So I have discovered that personally, I don't want to be boxed in, and I am far beyond a curious person, and a fear of not experiencing things, even if I don't actually fully dive in as a career, is just not for me. Life to me seems more exciting trying new things, reading rather obsessively and curiously about different topics, than it is to dedicate to one thing my entire life. So something about that has always made me feel like suffocated. And this fear led me to never feel like I had a purpose, because I often associated purpose with career. And I am far from being bored, even when people don't like see me, and, you know, I don't post much of my life on social media. In fact, I would consider myself way overstimulated with learning and trying new things. And I get into these rabbit holes because I become interested in a topic, and through research of that topic, for example, you know, or trying something. Because to me, even if I'm physically trying something, I still have to do research. That's just how I am. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, I'm still going to want to do research, because I want to know like the deeper aspect of things too. So I come across, as I'm like doing research and whatever, you know, or trying new things, I come across something else, and then I want to dig into that, and then so on and so on. This often has caused me to also deal with imposter syndrome, because I saw how so many people, especially on social media, who are so good at what they do, like there are people who are fucking amazing at knowing all about eczema or psoriasis, you know, for example. This is just like a random example. Or who are like Enneagram gurus, you know, or how I can like, and it's like, I mean, and the list goes on, right? And like, how could I measure up to that when I have so many other things I'm interested in, you know, so many things that I don't even know I'll be interested in yet. When it came to like, for example, fitness, I thought I would only be considered fit if I looked a very specific way, and I looked fit, or I had some type of like trophy to go along with it. And I know I'll never become a professional IFBB pro, for example, and stand on an Olympia stage, but I can work hard and look like an off-season pro year-round. And to me, that's still great, because not everyone can necessarily do that or wants to do that. Even though to me, that's kind of considered average, that's not necessarily the case when you think about it in a bigger picture, of the world. And I like that idea more than to be at the top level, because being average, this average fit person, means I can also not diet. And I also have the ability to do way more other things that I want to do. Because although some people seem to be great, some people on social media are like great, and they're like these heroes that are like, they're pro athletes and they're at the top level and they're also doing all these other things. Like, that's great for them. And I probably could, but I don't know that I would necessarily be as happy. So again, not comparing. It's just something that I'm like, I think that if I were to be a person that's going to aim or would aim for an IFBB pro, for example, this is just an example, because it is a thought that I've had, then for me, I feel like it would take away a lot of the things, or my time and my energy, because I'd be too focused on the other, trying to be as great as I can in order to be the top, and it's just not really what I want. So I don't necessarily care to become great at everything that I do. I will dive as deep as I can on certain things without becoming great or a pro at it. And what I enjoy the most is more so the experience, and all that is liberating to feel that I don't have to be extraordinary at all. We all want to be great at things we do, and there will be things that I will place more effort in than others. Some are meant to be passing experiences, while others I will be more, good at. And a lot of people don't actually know, for example, that my mom she's been a cosmetologist nearly all of my life. I think she started when I was like 5 or 7 years old, something like that. And with her doing that over the years, I have learned a lot about hair. And there was one point where I considered it, going to school even to also do hair, but it wasn't something that I was like, I wanted to actually do long term. It was just something that I wanted to be better, and I wanted to find something that I can specialize in a little bit more. But then at the same time, I was like, I don't know if that's something that I want to do, because me being me, I just never want to commit to something, one thing. And I thought, well, that's kind of a lot of money to just go in and just do as a hobby, when I have someone right here who could teach me some things that if I'm interested in. And so I had the opportunity to cut my mom's hair, because she has shorter hair, and so she was doing lots of like fades and stuff like that on her hair. And with quarantine hit, it was like I really got a chance to practice cutting hair and doing fades and using clippers and things like that, and it was really awesome to an extent. But I didn't find myself interested enough to want to really hone in and do research like I normally would. And so that really kind of just told me that it was like that it was something that I wanted to just say that I did, or like I tried, and that to me was enough. Something else that has been always interesting to me, and I've always wanted to try, is being a DJ. So I grew up with my uncle, who has been a DJ like literally even before I was born. So I remember just having really cool experiences, because he lived with my grandparents for a long time, and I would often go and visit my grandparents and stay with them. So I got to experience what I would see my uncle often practicing, all the time whenever he was at home. And I would also experience where he was like, also working on his mixtapes, because he would do a lot of those and hand them out at parties and things like that. He also he sometimes would be really just sweet. And, if my cousins were kind of like all at my grandparents' house or whatever, just hanging out with the family, it was so funny, because I just always remember like really good memories about my uncle. my uncle would set up all his, his stuff. He would put on the music. He would have his set up his lights and the fog, and then he would have us all come down to his room and just have like our own little like party, and it was really, really fun. So I've always kind of had that like just feeling of wanting to be a DJ, and it was something that has always interested me, and the really cool thing about that is, again, it was something that like I know that it's not what I really want to necessarily do, but I could still have fun with it and try it and play around with it. Actually, I had done a little bit of, like just searching around, and I found actually on Amazon, there are like less professional type of equipment that you could do, that you can buy, like mixers that essentially, you can kind of still practice and do and play around with, without having to actually invest in the professional and higher end quality, equipment and I think something like that is super awesome, because really I just want to experience it on my own and potentially, make a little track, share with some friends and family, things like that. It doesn't have to be anything grand. And so if things like that, I'm just kind of like sharing little tidbits on a more personal level of why I'm just like, like there's so many things, like I don't understand why and how. Like to me, that's just another way of really experiencing life and having fun with it and continuing to, find it challenging instead of always. I mean, of course, it's cool to also be super great at something and practicing and doing it so much that you just become like a pro, or whatever. Even if you're not, even if it's not like a sport and you're not going pro, like you can still be super great. And I find that to be cool. Like, don't get me wrong, but it's just not really who I am. And I think, part of me sharing all of this is also it's not so much to be like, oh, well, this is how I am, and like I'm trying to prove anything. But what I'm trying to share this is I have held like a lot of confusion and shame and anxiety because you see more people that are into just one thing, and then it makes you feel like that's what you're supposed to be doing. And because you feel so confused, or I've felt so confused about what is it that I want to do, because like I said, doing one thing just literally makes me feel so boxed in and suffocated that I'm like, I don't want to choose the wrong thing to do. And then it makes you kind of like overthink and just become really afraid. And then you don't really end up doing anything because you're so scared that like you're going to choose the wrong thing and then you're going to be unhappy. And without realizing that some of us aren't meant to be that and aren't necessarily have to be that. And it's okay. And it's something that is taking me years, like literally 30 plus years to figure out. And I still am figuring things out to, what is it that I want, because I don't really want to continue to work all the rest of my life in a job that isn't really satisfying me. I don't think that it's serving my potential to who I'm supposed to be, but I don't really know what direction to take yet, and I'm just kind of like still in that phase where I'm exploring things. And, you go through so many years of feeling this type of way and being held back and not doing anything from the fear that it's going to take a little bit of time to adjust and to kind of align the body and the mindset, and to, just to figure out and be okay and continuing to play around with things and seeing how those things make me feel. And kind of like, because I'm still in that phase where, like I said, I'm testing things out and I'm like, oh, that was fun. That was just a fun bypassing, activity or thing that I wanted to do. Now I'm over it. And then there's things where I'm still like learning and I'm like, you know what, this is going to be in my bucket of things that I do. And then it's like, I'm still learning to, to figure out what is it that I can potentially do well at and feel good at the same time and make money off of it. What type of service can I offer that's going to be beneficial to other people, that's going to, make me feel good, and that's going to represent me and all these things to be able to, make a living. Or there's kind of like a middle ground too, which it doesn't necessarily apply to me, but it could. And I feel like this can also apply to other people. And I sense people sometimes feel a lot of like confusion and shame because what I'm saying is, people do something, a career, right? And then all of a sudden it's like a few years pass and then all of a sudden that's like not what they want to do, and they start to shift, and it makes people around them question them, and it makes people around them question their responsibility and all these things, because it's like, well, you have such a great job, why are you wanting to get rid of and change and get yourself into debt again, because now you're having to take more, you have to go back to school or whatever the case is. And then sometimes for that reason people don't actually go after what they want, and it's just like you're limiting yourself because to evolve as a person, because sometimes you're not meant to stick to something that you once liked, and just because you once liked it doesn't mean anything about you. It's like it just served its purpose, for what it did and when it did, and now it's time for you to spread your wings and try something different and help other people and experience new things and continue to just evolve as a person. And that's what I find to be really beautiful and also quite powerful, actually, because that takes a lot of like guts. And it means you're following your intuition, which I find that to be amazing. And, you're taking a risk and you're taking challenges, and that's all difficult things to do in life. It's like you're starting from scratch, and that's all like change is also, it's a really big thing, and it's a commitment that you're having to face. And change for some people, it's a lot more complex and draining than it is for others. So anytime I hear people change, it's like amazing, but especially if I know that the person struggles with change, I'm that type of person that I really struggle with change, and it's not that I don't like it, but it's just that I really give props those people even like 10 times fold because of that struggle that in there pushing themselves, and that shit is just amazing to me. And so that's why I'm kind of expressing this, is that there's different scenarios and different people who fit those scenarios, and I don't think that we should be ashamed and that we should limit ourselves. And, if it's meant for you to stick to a job all of your life, then great. But there's also a lot of us that aren't meant to be that, and it's okay. And that's the voice that I'm trying to bring out to everyone, including myself.